world, welcome back to another tutorial. So today's video we are focusing on pleating, but specifically hand sewing pleats, or I guess you could say hand sewing pleats into your draped garment for heavy fabrics or heavy gowns. So y'all, this dress, you can't see the whole thing, but it is super heavy. And so when you are sewing garments that are super heavy, especially something like this, so I don't know if you can really, well, I'm pretty sure y'all can. You can see the detail. It's meant to go from pleat to flare. Let's say that, pleat to volume. And so because of that, there's a specific way that these hand stitches have to be done. So I have some stitches kind of put in place, but I actually need to go in and redo them to make this something that is a long-lasting, well-constructed, wearable garment. So that is what we're going to be doing in this video. So if you ever wanted to know, well, I'm draping or designing with a really heavy fabric, but I really would love to add some pleats into it as like a draping technique, this video is definitely going to help you with that. So let's get started. So currently how I have these pleats in place, or how they're sewn down, they are honestly way too loose. I love for my garments to be very form-fitting, and it definitely accentuate the waist. And how these pleats are currently sewn, there's a lot of space in the stomach area, meaning the pleats aren't actually sewn down to the corset bodice that I have inside of the dress. It's just sewn to the top layer of fabric that I draped over, and that's making the dress look a lot bigger than it really is. And so the first thing that I'm going to do is take apart all of my pleats, but I'm going to still make sure that I leave the outer seams of my drape attached, meaning I'm not trying to remove the entire drape from the dress or the entire section of pleats from the dress. I'm just trying to re-sew the pleats that have been sewn throughout the middle. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start placing our pleats. So I want to make sure that as I am repinning and readjusting these pleats, some of them, I want to say I ended up actually removing one pleat completely, but we want to make sure that we are making this garment fitted and well tailored to the client. So as you can see, there is a lot of room. As I am shifting these pleats, you can see that there's a lot of room inside the front of this dress. That's how loose it was, probably like a few inches of space between the drape and the actual corset. So once we have our pleats placed, now we are going to start seeing where our stitches are going to go. So for this style of draping, and because we're using this type of fabric, we are going to have two placements for our stitches. In between the fold of each pleat, we are going to do a stitch. Not only that, but on the back side of each pleat, we are also going to do a stitch. Now, both of these stitches will be hidden. You will not see them from the front side of the dress at all. Now, typically how I teach in my classes, I always tell my students that the goal is not to have your stitches seen in your lining either. I like for us to stitch everything to the outside of our drape, but because this dress is already sewn and essentially I'm doing alterations to something I've made previously in the past, then you'll be able to see the stitches on the inside for this specific garment. But anyways, back to the pleats. Now, before you start sewing, one thing that I always like to do is I like to pull my drape or my pleat a little bit tighter, just to make sure that it's truly fitting the body. So now we can go ahead and start our hand sewing. So what you want to do is you want to sew close to the inner folds that's in between each pleat. Now we are sewing this stitch or this stitch line. We're sewing this to the bodice of our dress. When you start sewing, there are a few things that you should remember. Make sure you knot the beginning of each stitch. I typically like to knot mine 2 to 3 times. Also, it's really easy for you to make sure that you're sewing through the correct layers of fabric by putting your hand underneath the underneath the dress as you were sewing. And then another thing to keep in mind is you don't want to make your stitches too wide. I would say maybe about a 1/4 inch is fine. Even if it's a little bit bigger than that works as well too. So I'm gonna allow this to speed up a little bit just because this part is pretty repetitive. Doing this technique, it's honestly very simple, but it makes a super huge difference in how your drape lays. But I am going up all the way to the top corner of my drape, basically until I'm unable to sew anymore. And to give it a little bit more security, I also added another stitch that essentially would go behind the pleat so it would be invisible. As you can see, the stitch that I just did, it goes behind where I just pinned that pleat down to. Hey y'all, I know you're enjoying this tutorial and we're about to get right back into the video, but I wanted to take a moment to personally invite you to my Couture draping course. I designed this course for the designers who already have a great foundation. You know how to cut, you know how to sew, you know how to create, but you are ready to take your designs to the next level and actually start creating some couture garments. You want to be able to create the things with volume and structure and all these different things. Now, in this course, we have different types of projects available. We have some that will show you how to drape a garment from start to finish, and then we also have some that are going to just focus on the techniques only. That way you can really get a good mix of everything you need. Normally, enrollment is $500, but if you're watching this video, you will be able to get this course for a discount. So at checkout, enter the code ESCTUTORIAL and you'll be able to get this course for $350. And yes, we have payment plans available too. So if you're serious about becoming a better designer, you want to grow your craft, you want to see your skills improve, and you want to get results like my students who have been able to create garments like this just from being in my program for a matter of weeks, then go ahead, click the link in the description, and I can't wait to see what you create. Now, let's get back to the video. So now, before we move on to the next type of stitch, we are going to do that to every single one of our pleats. So here's a closer look. As you can see, I have a pin placed, I want to say about 1/2 inch away from the edge of my pleat. I started from that point and sewed through the entire bottom of the pleat to hold it in place, and then I started to sew upwards through that inner corner of my pleat. So essentially the shape that my stitch is creating is like a L shape. Remember, none of these stitches will be visible because we are sewing behind our pleats and also in between each of our pleats. Also, us sewing our pleats along the bottom helps with the fit of the garment because, like I mentioned earlier, there was a lot of space between the fabric, like the drape itself, and then the actual corset or bodice inside of the dress because of how it was originally sewn. And so making sure that that fabric is sewn down to the actual base of the dress allows us to get a really great fit. So now that this is sewn, or at least we have sewn in between all of our pleats, now we want to go ahead and sew through the back side of our pleats, but we will be doing this from the inside of the dress. This will give our pleats the support and hold that it needs to be able to be well fitted to the waist and also hold its place and not be too heavy for the dress as well. Also, before we take this down, make sure you have all of your pins back in place. Once you move your garment from the dress form, this is what your dress should look like. So now we can prepare to sew the back half of our pleats. As I mentioned before, I am sewing mine from the inside, basically through the back of my lining. This is not something that I recommend doing. I always say sew through the outside, the shell of your garment. Also, don't mind the random white fabric on the inside. When we made alterations for this dress, the client last minute wanted to add this piece to it, and this was the only lining that I had on hand. Now, since this fabric is so colorful and because I am essentially sewing an invisible stitch, this is going to be a little hard to show, but as you can see, I used my needle. I pushed it in through the lining from the back, and I grabbed a tiny piece of fabric, basically of the back half of my pleat. Now, apologies because I did not realize my angle was so bad at this point, but once I poked my needle through the back half of the pleat, I simply poked the needle back through the back of the dress. So bringing the needle back through the lining. So through the outer layers of the dress and back through the lining, and then I knotted it. Also, when I knotted the thread, I knotted it from the back. So I knotted it from the lining side. So if you were doing this starting from scratch or starting from the beginning steps, you would be doing your knot on the back half of the shell of the dress. So now as we do this part, you're going to need to thread multiple needles because we don't want to use one thread to get through all of our pleats. We're going to do this in pieces. I think I maybe threaded my needle 3 to 4 times. But as I'm doing this, I'm constantly checking the back and the front of my dress to make sure I am not sewing through the front of the pleat. So we know that a pleat has a front side and a back side. Our goal is to only grab a little piece of the back side of the pleat. Now, in some areas, you'll be able to actually see where you're grabbing onto. In some places, you won't be, so you'll have to try and feel for it. But regardless, you just want to make sure that you are not grabbing the front of the pleat the entire time that you are doing this stitch. Here's a slightly closer view of what it looks like for me to pull the thread through the back of the pleat only, and then I'm pushing the needle back through the shell of the fabric and coming out towards our lining. I know it's really hard to see. I really wish I would have known the angle was not that good, but I'm gonna see if I can show y'all an even closer angle of what this looks like. So right here you can see me working from the outside of the dress, but as you can see, I am trying to push my needle through the dress, but I am also pulling the top layer of my pleat forward. That way the needle doesn't catch it. For this part, I probably made each stitch a few inches long, and as I finished each stitch, of course, I ended it with a knot and I knotted it a few times. So here's the finished look. This looks way better than it originally did, and this is perfect for dresses that you have pleats that don't anchor into a seam. But go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.